There we go. Thank you, Justin. Oh. See, thank you very much, because knowing me, I'd probably change that about halfway through this episode. So we're working now. I'm just gonna repeat what I said for the past minute. Yeah, audio stream bitrate. Okay, I wanted to say, Dr. Tulung Shorts 2025 Part 1 should be out this Saturday, the 12th of July, 2025. Also in time for AEW All in Texas, which now finally establishes itself as AEW's flagship event. And then, X-Real Beam Pro. Would I get it? Probably not. Maybe if I have enough money to afford this. Maybe 100 times over. I don't know what this is. Alright. Well, those inquiries are out of the way. Now, back to our regularly scheduled program. Would I wear a smartwatch? Again, these are all... I'm starting with inquiries that people have asked me personally. Would I wear a smartwatch? I've thought about it, primarily for fitness and other ease of, instead of just pulling out the phone and whatever. This is easy. But is it a necessity for me right now? No, not really. I don't think so. Again, same with the X-Real Beam Pro. I will get it when I could probably buy a smartwatch 10 times over. Although maybe earlier than the X-Real Beam Pro, because it's more useful. But yeah, smartwatch, Next inquiry. Octave/pitch preference in a partner? It's a peculiar question. I will try to answer that. Let's say... like me? Maybe? I don't really know how to answer that question. I wanna... Ooh, you know what? No, I have answered this off-stream in the past. Somebody with a narrator-like voice would be really fun to be around. So, that's my octave/pitch preference. I answered that inquiry. Next inquiry. Credit score I prefer in a partner. Let's start, right? I'm not asking... This is the preference, right? Not the requirement. Let's start with at least a 700. At least a 700. If that's too much, somebody come on this podcast and, talk about it. At least a 700. Boom. Would I ever open a joint bank account? Yes. Next question. Hair type preference, is dandruff a deal breaker? There are hair types that Hair types. I think I said let's go for the ones. All of them are fine. But... let's go with any of the ones. We'll go with any of that. Sure. Next... let's see. Next inquiry. What genetic trait would I edit about myself? My shrimp allergy. If that's a genetic trait, I would edit that. I remember I ate it when I was a kid and I liked it. I liked the taste of shrimp, but I didn't realize that the side effects... I didn't realize I had an adverse reaction to shrimp until I was in, middle school? So, that. Next, what would it take for me to no longer do prize picks? Well, I've learned this throughout the past few days. If you keep winning, if Prize Picks realizes that you've found the key to becoming profitable in the long term, I think they lower your they lower your play limit or play amount to $5 or something like that. So Currently, the goal is to get so good that they stop me. And even then, you know, well, Prize Picks is a good, you know, it's a way to sprinkle some money into your account. It's a nice little sprinkle of money into your account. But I will play Prize Picks until they ban me. That's the bottom line. Next, is religion an important factor to you? Yes. Next question. I will answer binary questions with binary answers. Would I ever get an Android? No. Next question. Or inquiry. In baseball, how would I feel sliding across the dirt if it were gravel? That it would hurt. It would hurt. It would tear up my uniform. Not pleasant. But those guys love the game, so they'll probably do it anyway. Next inquiry. Date to marry a guy? No. Next question. Would I try the sourest drink in the world challenge? Yes. Next inquiry. Would I ever stream on Kick? No. If my woman friend were interested in my brother, would I let them? Sure, why not? Next. Would I ever have a concubine? I looked up this word, but let's... A concubine...
Concubine
is a woman who cohabits with a man, often of higher social status, without being legally married to him. This relationship, known as concubinage, differs from marriage in its lack of legal and social recognition. Cohabits with the man. I remember when I discussed this off stream when the inquiry was first brought up to me, I thought, oh, this is just antiquated friends with benefits. But you have to cohabit with them. You know, now we'll just call it medieval friends with benefits. We'll just call it that. Would I ever have one? No. If I traveled to the 1200s, what dynasty would I be a part of? Well, let's answer that as objectively as possible. Most powerful dynasty of the 1200s. How about most equitable? We're gonna say, we're gonna say the Mongol Empire. If I could be automatically native in any language, what would it be? Mandarin. Should we erase politics? No. Would I ever play Osu? In terms of technically encompassing this question, yes. Would I give people my LinkedIn? And I have to clarify this. Would I give people my account? No. Inquiries complete. Next, a new section of the podcast called Mentions. It's basically people tell me things, or people want to bring things they know to my attention. That's news in the world and whatever. So, the first mention, Meta offers a $100 million sign-on bonus to OpenAI employees. That's what they wanted me to know. They gave me, the first website they gave me was from Reuters. So, from Reuters, Sam Altman says Meta offered $100 million bonuses to OpenAI employees. June 17th, Reuters. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said that Meta has offered his employees Meta.o? Huh? Okay. His employees bonuses of $100 million to recruit them as the tech giant seeks to ramp up its artificial intelligence strategy. The alleged attempts by Meta to hire OpenAI staffers are the latest signs of a frenzy to hire top engineers to develop AI models, and they come at a time when the Facebook owner is working on building its superintelligence unit to catch up with competitors. Competition for AI talent has reached a feverish pitch as superstar researchers are being courted like professional athletes. Oh, researchers are being courted like professional athletes on the belief that individual contributors can make or break companies. Meta started making giant offers to a lot of people on our team, Altman said on the Uncapped podcast that aired on Tuesday, hosted by his brother. You know, like $100 million signing bonuses, more than that in compensation per year. Okay, pictures. Yay, pictures. At least, so far, none of our best people have decided to take them up on that, Altman said. None of our best people. Meta did not immediately respond to a request for comment outside regular business hours, and Reuters could not verify the information. I've heard that Meta thinks of us as their biggest competitor, Altman said. His comments come just days after Meta invested $14.3 billion in data labeling startup Scale AI and hired its top boss, Alexander Wang. Oh, he's the young millionaire. I think I watched one of his videos on YouTube or something like that. I don't remember. And hired its top boss, Alexander Wang, to lead its new superintelligence team. Meta, once recognized as a leader in open source AI models, has suffered from staff departures and has postponed the launches of new open source AI models that could rival competitors like Google, China's DeepSeek, and OpenAI. Well, okay, alright, well, that's good to know. That is the only mention. I'll move this up here. That is the only mention. What was I gonna say? Yeah. That is the only mention brought up to me this week. Now it's time for the best part of the podcast, the news. All right, I have selected 3 articles. One from Pew, one from NPR, one from BBC. Let's read. This is what the data says about Medicaid from Pew Research Center. Here we go. The last thing I could find was on June 26th. And by that point, let's just read about Medicaid. Medicaid, the joint federal-state health insurance program that covers about 1 in 5 Americans, may be in for some of the biggest changes in its 60-year history. The tax, spending, and policy bill, making its way through Congress, seeks to cut hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid over the next decade to help offset the measure's even larger tax cuts. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that the Medicaid cuts, along with changes to other federal insurance programs, would lead to millions of people losing health coverage should the bill become law. Given the changes that may be in store for the program and its overall complexity, here are answers to some common questions about Medicaid. Alright, what is Medicaid? Medicaid provides health insurance to various categories of low-income people. It's funded jointly, though not equally, by the federal government and the states. However, the way the program is structured and run means that in many ways there's no single Medicaid program. Rather, there are 56. One for each state, the District of Columbia, and the 5 permanently inhabited U.S. territories. Medicaid was created in 1965 at the same time as Medicare, the federal health insurance program primarily for people ages 65 and older. Both programs are overseen by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, an agency within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Oh, well, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, I guess that directly influenced the college at UNH. The Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, created in 1997, is designed to cover children from families whose incomes are modest but too high to qualify for Medicaid. While CHIP is formally separate from Medicaid, the 2 programs are closely coordinated in practice. In fact, some states administer CHIP as an extension of their Medicaid programs, while others either operate CHIP separately or combine the two approaches. This analysis will present data for Medicaid and CHIP separately when possible. Medicaid is broadly popular. More than 8 in 10 U.S. adults have a favorable opinion of the program, according to a recent survey by KFF, a nonpartisan research organization focused on health policy. That view is shared by 93% of Democrats, 74% of Republicans, and 83% of independents. Is Medicaid eligibility determined by the federal government or the states? Both. The federal government sets general rules about who always qualifies for Medicaid and which healthcare services must be covered. Beyond that, states have considerable flexibility to determine the scope of their programs by extending eligibility to additional groups of people, or not, and covering various optional health care services, or not. For example, under the federal affordable, For example, under the Federal Affordable Care Act of 2010, states can expand eligibility to adults with household incomes up to 138% of the federal poverty level, which in 2025 would be $44,367 for a family of 4, with the federal government picking up 90% of the additional cost. 40 states and D.C. have expanded their Medicare programs in this way, while the other 10 states have not. Who's eligible for Medicaid? Originally, Medicaid was aimed at certain categories of low-income people: families with children, pregnant women, and the elderly, blind, or disabled. People in those groups who received some form of public assistance generally also qualified for Medicaid coverage. Those eligibility groups have broadened over time. States are required to cover some groups. For instance, children in foster care and former foster care youth up to age 26. Coverage is optional for others. For example, pregnant women and infants in households with incomes between 133% and 185% of the federal poverty level. Since each state sets its own eligibility criteria within broad federal minimums, there's no simple way to summarize them. In fiscal year 2022, 36% of all Medicaid enrollees were children, according to the Medicaid and CHIP Payment and Access Commission. Another 26 were adults who had become eligible under the 2010 Affordable Care Act. 18% were adults who had already been eligible, and 20% were elderly, blind, or disabled. How many people have Medicaid coverage? As of January 2025, 71.4 million people were enrolled in Medicaid, according to preliminary CMS data. That's about 23% of the U.S. population. An additional 7.3 million were enrolled in CHIP. Together, the two programs covered nearly 41.4 million adults and 37.4 million children, or 23% of the U.S. population. Children are covered by Medicaid at a higher rate than adults. We estimate that 41% of all U.S. children were enrolled in Medicaid, and 10% were enrolled in CHIP as of January. The two programs combined provided health coverage to more than half of the country's 73.1 million children. By comparison, Medicaid enrolled 15% of the U.S. adult population as of January. How has Medicaid enrollment changed over time? While the long-term trend has been upward, Medicaid enrollment has remained relatively steady for the past several years at around 20% of the U.S. population. Medicaid enrollment counts are affected by factors including population growth and general economic conditions, since more people become eligible in downturns as they lose jobs and income. But policy changes play a significant role as well. Congress and individual states can expand or restrict eligibility rules and, separately, make it easier or harder for people to enroll and maintain their eligibility status. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, Congress gave states extra money for their Medicaid programs on the condition that they maintain coverage for nearly everyone who was already enrolled in the program, rather than periodically rechecking their eligibility, as is normally required. This continuous coverage rule led to a steep rise in enrollment, from 64.8 million in March 2020 to a peak of 87.4 million in April 2023, an increase of 34.8%. The extra funds began to phase out in April 2023 and ended completely. along with the continuous coverage requirement that December. Medicaid enrollment has fallen steadily since then, to 21% of the U.S. population as of January 2025. In January How do Medicaid enrollment rates vary around the country? In January 2025, by our calculations, Medicaid enrollment ranged from a high of 34.2% of the population in D.C. to a low of 8.6% in Utah. Enrollment in CHIP ranged from 4.4% in Oregon to 0.1% in Minnesota. Again, state enrollment rates in these programs depend on factors including local economic conditions and each state's eligibility rules. What are the demographics of Medicaid enrollees? Here's some of what we know based on 2023 data from the Current Population Survey's Annual Social and Economic Supplement, or ASEC. Note that ASEC defines Medicaid to include CHIP and a handful of other state-administered programs for low-income people. Women account for just over half of Medicaid enrollees, slightly higher than their share of the overall U.S. population. Non-Hispanic white enrollees account for 39.6% of all Medicaid recipients, versus 58.0% of the U.S. population as a whole. Hispanic people, who can be of any race, comprise 30.8% of enrollees versus 19.7% of the population. And black people make up 20.8% of enrollees versus 13.5% of the population. The share of Asian American enrollees was about the same as their share of the overall population. 6.0 versus 6.6. Medicaid enrollees ages 19 to 64 are more likely than Americans in that age group overall to never have been married. Or to be divorced or separated. They're much less likely than Americans overall to be currently married. Nearly half of enrollees have household incomes of less than $50,000, compared with 23.8% of the general population. More than half of enrollees ages 26 to 64 have a high school diploma or less, compared with 34.9% of the population in that age group. 17.0%, let's just say 17%, of enrollees rate their health status as fair or poor, compared with 11.2% of all people surveyed. 84.2% of Medicaid enrollees were born in the United States. 6.6% are naturalized citizens, and 9.2% are foreign-born non-citizens. Those shares are all similar to the U.S. population as a whole. Only some non-citizens are eligible for Medicaid. Unauthorized immigrants are not eligible for the program. Are Medicaid enrollees required to work? In most cases, no. But under the budget legislation pending in Congress, people who qualify for Medicaid under the 2010 Affordable Care Act expansion would have to work, do community service, or go to school to retain their eligibility. Georgia operates a pilot work requirement under a waiver approved during the first Trump administration. In a recent Pew Research Center survey, 49% of U.S. adults said they would favor work requirements for most adults who get in health insurance through Medicaid, while 32% would oppose such requirements, and 18% weren't sure. Most working-age adult enrollees in Medicaid already work, according to a May 2025 analysis by KFF. Just over 31.2 million people ages 19 to 64 were enrolled in Medicaid in 2023, KFF found. More than 2.4 million of them were also covered by Medicare, and 2.7 million received disability benefits from Social Security or supplemental security income benefits. Excluding those two groups of people, who presumptively have disabilities that would exempt them from the work requirements, leaves 26.1 million enrollees. Among that group, 11.5 million worked full-time, and 5.1 million worked part-time. Of the 9.5 million who didn't work, 3.2 million cited caregiving responsibilities as a reason, while 1.7 million said they were in school, and 2.6 million cited illness or disability. How much does Medicaid cost? In fiscal 2023, the most recent year for which detailed financial information is available, Medicaid's net cost was $894.2 billion. The federal government paid just over two-thirds of that figure, while states, D.C., and territories paid the rest. Under Medicaid, states pay healthcare providers up front. The federal government then reimburses states for part of those costs. Those federal payments are a lot larger in some states than others. In fiscal 2023, for example, the federal government paid for 82.1% of New Mexico's program, 71% of Tennessee's, and 59.7% of Wyoming's. The federal shares of the territories' programs were all 85% or higher. The federal matching rates vary because they're based largely on each state's per capita income and are recalculated each year based on new data. In addition, certain services and subgroups of enrollees are reimbursed at their own specific rates. Historically, the federal government's overall share of Medicaid costs has hovered between 56% and 59%, though Congress has often raised matching rates temporarily during economic downturns. The federal share rose above 60% and stayed there after the Affordable Care Act expanded Medicaid eligibility. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when Congress authorized extra payments to states for retaining people on the rolls, the federal share reached as high as 71% in fiscal 2022. How much of federal and state budgets go to Medicaid? In fiscal 2024, Medicaid represented about 8% of all federal spending, according to archive data from the Office of Management and Budget. This was down from a peak of 10% the year before. Medicaid's share of federal spending grew steadily from the program's inception until the 2004 fiscal year, and since then it has bounced around more erratically. State spending on Medicaid varies considerably. Because much of what states spend on Medicaid is ultimately reimbursed by the federal government, a better way to analyze the program's budget impact is to look only at locally raised dollars spent on Medicaid as a share of all locally raised money spent. We're using locally raised dollars to mean money raised by state and local taxes, fees and assessments, or borrowed by states, whether held in their general funds or other specialized funds. Considered that way, Missouri spent the most in fiscal 2023. It spent 25.5% of its locally raised dollars on Medicaid, according to data from the National Association of State Budget Officers. Hawaii spent the least of any state, at 5.7% of its locally raised dollars. Where does all that money go? In fiscal 2023, a total of $884.4 billion was spent on on medical services through Medicaid, according to our analysis of CMS financial data. That figure includes rebates and offsets of various kinds, but excludes $24.5 billion collected from patients and third parties. Net spending on services was $859.9 billion. More than half of that money went to managed care organizations, or MCOs. Most Medicaid beneficiaries, 85% in 2022, are enrolled in some type of managed care plan. Under such plans, states contract with MCOs and pay a fixed monthly fee per enrollee. The MCO then either provides healthcare services to beneficiaries itself or pays providers to do so. Almost $112.8 billion was spent on home and community-based long-term care services, while another $60.4 billion went for institutional long-term care. All told, 19.6% of all Medicaid spending went to long-term care. Another $87.9 billion, or nearly 10%, went to hospitals, and $18.8 billion went towards prescription drugs. About $27.6 billion went to pay Medicare premiums and copays for low-income elderly people who receive both Medicaid and Medicare benefits. In addition, $34.4 billion went to federal and state administrative expenses, amounting to 3.8% of net spending. How big a role does Medicaid play in U.S. healthcare overall? In 2023, Medicaid accounted for 17.9 cents of every dollar spent on health care in the United States, according to health expenditure data from CMS. Excluding medical research and spending on buildings and medical equipment, which Medicaid doesn't pay for at all, the program paid 18.8 cents of every dollar spent on health care services. Since about 1990, Medicaid's share of overall health spending has mostly grown, albeit in fits and starts. Medicaid is a much more significant player in particular areas. For example, in 2023, more than a third of home healthcare spending and nearly a third of spending on nursing homes came via Medicaid, according to CMS. That same year, Medicaid paid for 41% of births in the country, according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And that is the end of this Pew Research article. These are related. Thank you, Medicaid! Alright, that's the Pew article. Next is the NPR article that I've chosen. Buy now, pay... From NPR. Buy now, pay later purchases can now affect your credit score. Here's what that means. The credit scoring company FICO recently announced that it will add something new to some of its credit scores. Data from buy now, pay later loans. Those are the loans that allow shoppers, usually online, to break up a purchase into installment, a way to pay that's become very popular. Let's take a look at what this could mean for your credit score. A shift toward splitting... I'm not going to read the title. It's only for the Pew stuff because they were formatted as questions. The offer to buy now, pay later has become ubiquitous when shopping online. At checkout, it's now common to see the option to pay in installments with a service like Affirm or Klarna. One typical format allows shoppers to break the cost into 4 flat payments, with no interest if they pay on time. Or they can split it into more installments with interest. Wait, more installments? So beyond 4 with interest? Shoppers can also use the company's apps to pay in physical stores. Lots of Americans are choosing these options. In 2024, 15% of American adults had used this type of payment in the previous 12 months, the Federal Reserve found. A FICO score is used by lenders to assess your credit worthiness and decide whether to offer you a loan or a credit card, and at what rate. And right now, your FICO score doesn't include data about any buy now, pay later loans. But starting in the fall, 2 of FICO scoring products, out of the 15 or so it offers, will incorporate that data. Buy now, pay later is becoming a really big part of how people are managing their finances, and so FICO wanted to be able to manage and reflect that shift, says Julie May, Vice President and General Manager of Business-to-Business Scores at FICO. So who's using buy now, pay later? Its biggest adopters are low and middle income folks, Black and Hispanic people, women, millennials, and members of Gen Z, according to the Federal Reserve. Those who use these payments say they're convenient and allow them to spread out the cost of purchases or avoid credit cards and interest payments. And for some, it's the only way they can afford to make their purchase. But typically, these loans are pretty small, averaging $142 in 2022. FICO says lenders have been wanting this kind of data to give them a fuller picture of people's finances. Without it, there's been something of a blind spot, says Adam Rust, Director of Financial Services at the Consumer Federation of America. In the past, when buy now, pay later loans have not been reported to credit bureaus, that has meant that credit card lenders couldn't see the presence of that debt when they were making a decision on how much credit to offer. And that set up a possibility where a lender might offer more credit than a person can reasonably afford to pay, Rust says. We want people to get the credit that they need, but we don't want lenders to be flooding the market with credit beyond what's safe and reasonable for consumers, he adds. Some of this data sharing has already begun. The payment company Affirm began sharing consumers' loan data with credit bureau Experian in April. The effect on individuals' credit scores will depend on whether they make payments on time. Paying on time should help your credit. Missing payments could ding it. FICO did a year-long study with data from Affirm and said that incorporating these scores had a pretty small effect, within 10 points up or down, for more than 85% of the consumers in their study. The company did not disclose the effect on the other 15%. For those using buy now, pay later loans as their first foray into credit, the change will be helpful, as it'll allow the company to generate a FICO score for them, says May. I think for all consumers who are using these products, who are responsibly making payments on time, it will also be positive, she adds. But Rust cautions that this change may not make a huge difference. A recent study from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that people often use buy now, pay later only sporadically. I'm just practicing my diaphragm breathing. If a person is hoping that using a single buy now, pay later loan will have a dramatic effect on their credit, it's likely that won't be the case, says Russ. It's still only going to be as impactful as the overall use of it. And of course, there's the risk of hurting your score. Almost a quarter of people using these loans made a late payment last year, according to the Federal Reserve. As with credit cards, as with your home loan or auto loan, making on-time payments, being responsible about credit utilizations that's been granted to you, understanding the amount of credit that you're asking for. These are the things that make up the FICO score calculation, says May. And that will continue with the introduction of buy now, pay later loans into that score. Rust also warns that even though people are using these loans a lot, like when they use credit cards, they don't offer the same protections, especially when it comes to disputes. For instance, consumers have had issues when they cancel an order, but can't get refunded by the seller. But they're still on the hook for payments to these third-party companies. Those kinds of problems are addressed with the regulations surrounding credit cards, says Rust. In some ways, credit cards have stronger protections than almost any form of credit. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issued a rule last year that essentially treated buy now, pay later lenders the same as credit card providers, giving consumers more protections, including a right to dispute charges. But in May, under the Trump administration, the CFPB said it was pulling back from enforcing that rule and would consider rescinding it. Okay. That's buy now, pay later. That relates to you. Look into it. And now a pressing matter in the United States. From BBC, we have young campers, teachers, and football coach among Texas flood victims. Young attendees and staff at summer camps are among the victims of flash floods in Texas, along with teachers, a football coach, and a hero father who smashed open a window to free his family amid rising water. Authorities say at least 91 people are known to have died, most of them in Kerr County. At least 27 girls and staff died at one location, Camp Mystic, alone. Many of the victims have been identified in the U.S. media by their relatives. Here's what we know so far about those who've been named, many of whom were children. Please forgive me. I'm going to attempt to pronounce this last name once, and yeah.
Smajstrla.
Smajstrla. No.
Smastrla.
Excuse me.
Smastrla.
Smashterla. Camp Mystic is a nearly century-old Christian summer camp for girls on the banks of the Guadalupe River near the community of Hunt. Operated by generations of the same family since the 1930s, the camp's website bills itself as a place to grow spiritually in a wholesome Christian atmosphere, to develop outstanding personal qualities and self-esteem. Renee Smastrla, 8, was at the camp when floodwater swept through, her uncle said in a Facebook post. Renee has been found, and while not the outcome we prayed for, the social media outreach likely assisted the first responders in helping to identify her so quickly, wrote Sean Salta. We are thankful she was with her friends and having the time of her life, as evidenced by this picture from yesterday, he wrote. She will forever be living her best life at Camp Mystic. 9-year-old Lila Bonner, a Dallas native, was found dead after flooding near Camp Mystic, according to NBC News. In the midst of our unimaginable grief, we ask for privacy and are unable to confirm any details at this time, her family told the news outlet. We ache with all who love her and are praying endlessly. I instinctively want to say Eloise, but
Eloise.
Eloise. Okay. Eloise Peck, 8, was also confirmed dead after the deluge at Camp Mystic, according to CBS News Texas. U.S. media reported that she was best friends with Lila Bonner. A sign posted outside Eloise Peck's home said she lost her life in the tragic flooding and asked for privacy for the family. Sarah Marsh, a student at Cherokee Bend Elementary School in Alabama, would have entered 3rd grade in August. She, too, was attending Camp Mystic, and her grandmother, Debbie Ford Marsh, posted online to say that her granddaughter was among the girls killed. We will always feel blessed to have had this beautiful, spunky ray of light in our lives. She will live on in our hearts forever, she wrote. In a post on Facebook, Alabama Senator Katie Britt said she was heartbroken over the loss of Sarah Marsh, and we are keeping her family in thoughts and prayers during this unimaginable time. 9-year-old Janie Hunt from Dallas was attending... My eyes itchy. Hold on, my eyelid. Itchy. Was attending the same camp and died in the floods. Her grandmother, Margaret Hunt, told the New York Times she went to Camp Mystic with 6 of her cousins, who were all safe. Margaret said Janie's parents had to visit a funeral home and identify their daughter. Janie was a great-granddaughter of the oil baron William Herbert Hunt. Twin sisters Hannah and Rebecca Lawrence, 8, also died after attending Mystic, their grandfather told the Miami Herald. It has been an unimaginable time for all of us, grandfather David Lawrence Jr. told the newspaper in a statement. Hannah and Rebecca gave their parents John and Lacey, and sister Harper, and all in our family so much joy. David had earlier clarified that the twins' elder sister Harper was safe. Richard Eastland, the longtime co-owner and co-director of Camp Mystic, died while being flown to a Houston hospital. The news was confirmed by Kerr County Judge Rob Kelly, who attended Bible study with Dick, and described him as a pillar of the local community. Dick's wife, Tweety, was found safe at the Riverside home, according to Texas Public Radio. The Eastlands had run Camp Mystic, a girls' summer camp on the banks of the Guadalupe River, since 1974, becoming the 3rd generation of their family to do so. According to the Washington Post, the couple had 11 grandchildren, and much of the extended family was involved in camp life. The couple's eldest son, Richard, manages the camp kitchen, and their youngest, Edward, directs operations with his wife. Sorry. Is this, how do you pronounce this? How do you pronounce her name?
Chloe Childress.
Chloe Childress. Chloe Childress was one of Camp Mystic's camp counselors. The 18-year-old's death was announced by her former high school. Chloe made space for others to feel safe, valued, and brave. She understood what it meant to be part of a community, and more than that, she helped build one, the head teacher of Kincaid School wrote in a letter. She was due to start studies at the University of Texas in Austin later this year, ABC News added. Heart of the Hills is another all-girls camp that sits along the Guadalupe River, which was in the path of Friday's flood. Jane Ragsdale, described as the heart and soul of Heart of Hills, did not make it, a statement shared on the camp's official website said on Saturday. Ragsdale, who started off as a camper, then a counselor, became the director and co-owner of the camp in 1976. We are mourning the loss of a woman who influenced countless lives and was the definition of strong and powerful, the statement said. No campers were residing at the site when the floods hit, and most of those who were there have been accounted for, according to the statement. As floodwaters tore through their trailer in Ingram, Texas, Julian Ryan turned to his fiancée, Christina Wilson, and said, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to make it. I love y'all." Christina told Houston television station KHOU. His body wasn't recovered until hours later, after waters had receded. Julian had just finished a late dishwashing shift at a restaurant when the Guadalupe River overflowed early Friday. He and Christina woke to ankle-deep water that quickly rose to their waists. She told the station that their bedroom door stuck shut, and with water rushing in, Ryan punched through a window to get his family out. He severely cut his arm in the process. Their 13-month-old and 6-year-old sons and his mother survived by floating on a mattress until help could arrive. He died a hero, and that will never go unnoticed, Connie Salas, Ryan's sister, told KHOU. Catherine Eads, 52, was swept away by floodwaters in the Kerrville area of Texas early on Friday morning after she and her husband Brian, who told the New York Times, fled their camper van as rising water surged around them. Another camper had offered them a ride, and they made it across the street before the vehicle stalled in the flood. Moments later, both were pulled into the current. Brian said he lost sight of his wife after being struck by debris. He survived by clinging onto a tree until he reached dry land. Catherine's body was later recovered. God has her now, her mother, Elizabeth Moss Grover, wrote on Facebook. Amy Hutchinson, director of Olive Branch Counseling in Texas, where Catherine had worked, told the Washington Post that she was a hope and a light to all who knew her, a stellar counselor and professor. Teacher Jeff Wilson was also killed in Kerrville, according to the local school authority, which said he was a beloved teacher and co-worker who had served the district for more than 30 years. His wife and son were still missing, according to the Post by the Humble Independent School District. The group were on a camping trip when flooding struck, CBS News Austin reported. The death of another teacher, Reese Zunker, was announced by a second Texan schools authority. The football coach died alongside his wife Paula, according to Kerrville Independent School District. Their 2 children are still missing, the district's Facebook post added. Reese was a passionate educator, the Facebook post said. Paula, a former teacher, also left a lasting mark, the impact of which continued to be felt. 2 sisters from Dallas, 13-year-old Blair Harbor and 11-year-old Brooke Harbor, were staying with their grandparents along the Guadalupe River when their cabin was washed away, CBS News reported. The deaths were confirmed by St. Rita Catholic Community, where Brooke was due to start 6th grade. Blair was preparing to enter 8th grade. Please keep the Harbor family in your prayers during this time of profound grief. May our faith, our love, and our St. Rita community be a source of strength and comfort in the days ahead, said Father Joshua J. Whitfield in correspondence with church members. The girls' parents were in a separate cabin and were not harmed. Their grandparents are still unaccounted for. Husband and wife Bobby Martin, 46, and Amanda Martin, 44, also lost their lives, Mr. Martin's father told the New York Times. They, too, were said to be staying near the river when their vehicle was swept away by rising floodwaters. Bobby was described by a friend who spoke to the Houston Chronicle as a keen outdoorsman and attentive friend, and Amanda was the same shining light. Walmart employee Tanya Berwick, 62, was driving to work in San Angelo when floodwater hit early on Friday, family members said. Her empty vehicle and later her body were found the same day. She lit up the room and had a laugh that made other people laugh, her daughter, Lindsay Berwick, was quoted as saying by the AP news agency. Grandmother Sally Sample Graves was another victim of the flooding in Kerrville, according to her granddaughter, who posted a tribute on Facebook. A huge wave is said to have destroyed Sally's home. Her unwavering dedication to family has left an indelible mark on our lives, Sarah Sample wrote. Her father survived the incident, she added. The death of 22-year-old Caitlin Swallow in Williamson County was announced by county officials on Saturday. She was from the Liberty Hill area, and her body was recovered alongside the remains of another person. Officials did not give further information. And that is, yeah, that's BBC's article on the Texas flood victims. No, not F12. Yeah, those are the news articles today. Hopefully in a turn of mood, we're going to do the TikTok 10 swipes challenge, but absolutely not hopeful. How do I look at my view history? All right, this is 10 swipes, not 10 videos challenge. This is what I'm greeted with. I was greeted with something earlier, but I couldn't find it. If only there was... I'm gonna change my bio to 10 swipes. Is there a feature where you can look at previous... Is there a watch history feature? Alright. Okay, this is swipe 1. Swipe 2. Add. 2. Three. That's my friend. 3. This is 3. What? Okay, that was 3. 4. Add. 4. Or no. This is an add. It's not 4, but add. What the flip?
This is the first time I've even seen a waist in years. Meanwhile, that was me a month ago.
4. Cutting the sun in half. Four. 5. Doesn't count. Live. Doesn't count. Add. This is 5. Yeah. 6. 6? Seven. Sponsored. 7. Not this again. 7. World's best. What the flip? It doesn't matter. I don't even use this app. This bowling alley, this trampoline park, but you have to live your first ad. I'm not doing this again, bruh. Okay, 7. Sponsored, 8, doesn't count. Soul Train? Oh, wait. What number is this? 7 or 8? That was 8, right? 8. Yeah. 9 does not count. Add. 9 is a salt transition. Ten. Okay, that's enough. That's enough. That's enough. TikTok 10 swipes over. You know what time it is. It's time for the end of the podcast. Freestyle. Where's it? Okay. Okay. Texas on the map this week. I hope AEW funds the flooding damages, actually. Buy now, pay later. Add it to your FICO score. My friend's already in debt. Do you want some more? Done. Freestyle. Freestyle is done. I mean, I don't even care if it's just under an hour. Wait. Nah. I don't care if it's just under an hour. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Goodbye. Next time you'll see me bar riding.